Okay, well, hello again. It sounds like everyone could hear our panelists, so that's great. We'll go ahead and get started. Again, my name is Carolyn Shomley. I'm the Community Manager for PAR, and I'm happy to be here today with you all for our webinar, Made to Measure, How to Approach Sales Goals Today and Tomorrow. Before we begin, I do have a few technical notes just to pass along. If everyone could open up their chat module, it's the icon at the bottom of your screen. There's a little chat bubble. Just go ahead and click on that. You'll notice it pop up on the right-hand side. If you need to chat to any of our panelists today for questions, you may do that. There's a drop-down menu. It says To. Click on that, and you'll be able to select who exactly you want to chat to. So any questions you can send to panelists. Any technical problems today, you could send to me. I would be the host, and that's how you can communicate with us. A recording of this webcast will be available tomorrow, and we will send all of our registrants an email with that link. And again, you notice that our panelists are joining us today via video. You can control that video view of how you're seeing us today by clicking on the right-hand corner just above the slide presentation. There's 3 different thumbnails. The thumbnail on the far left, you'll be able to see all of our panelists at once. The thumbnail in the middle, you'll be able to see whoever is speaking a little bit larger on your screen. And in just a moment, I will actually turn off my video so that Sean and Carrie can go ahead with the presentation. Today's discussion will be led by the president of PAR, Sean Soth. Sean brings more than 20 years of association management and sales experience to his role, and an understanding of the unique opportunities that association teams have when leading with mission and value for business partnerships. So without further ado, hello, Sean. We can go ahead and get our presentation started.
Thanks, Carolyn. You left out how big a Journey fan I am. I know we share that. So I appreciate I appreciate the lead in, and everyone, we are dealing with some crazy times, of course, around goals and goal setting. If this is the first time you've ever heard of PAR, Professionals for Association Revenue, or you're maybe invited through a friend, welcome. The PAR has been started about a year ago almost, with the anticipated launch date of this June. And our Leadership Advisory Board was kind enough to motivate with me to get out there and really create some interesting topics around what we're all dealing with as business development professionals in the association space. And today we're going to be talking about, of course, goal setting for really the new 2020. We'll talk about a couple of ideas to kind of get you through right now. And I have a wonderful colleague and friend, longtime friend, joining me today, Mrs. Carrie Harton from MCI USA. And Carolyn, can you help us learn a little bit more about all the great things that Carrie and her team are doing?
Sure, yeah. Hi, Carrie. Carrie is a key member of our PAR Leadership Advisory Board, and we are so thankful that she's with us today. She's an organizational leader. She's the president of Sales Solutions and Services for MCI USA. For nearly 20 years, she has successfully delivered sales strategies for a variety of trade and professional associations. And as the president of Sales Solutions and Services for MCI, Carrie's specialties include revenue strategy and implementation, organizational management, media consulting, talent development, and recruiting. And she'll be a great resource today to talk about goals and how to set them. And with that, I'm going to turn my video off so that you and Carrie can have a great conversation.
Awesome. Hey, Carrie, how's it going?
I'm doing great, thank you. Glad to be here with everybody today. I am glad to be able to take some of the knowledge that I've somehow accumulated here to be able to share with everyone as it relates to goal setting. So this is a great topic and a very timely one.
Absolutely. And you know what? If we can't get through this goal setting work, our fallback is your monkey bread recipe. So I'm just going to come right out and ask you for that.
Well, then this better be pretty darn good today.
I think we got some good things. You know what was crazy? So in just preparing for the idea of goals, because we're both involved with a number of business development relationships for and with associations, including obviously ours here at PAR, I found this study that was consistently referenced in many, many presentations over many, many years. Think of like any of the big thought leaders in terms of motivation and sales preparation. I think Tony Robbins used it, Zig Ziglar, some of these folks. But it was a study, and the funny thing was they couldn't agree on the source, whether it was Harvard or Yale, and whether it was 53 or 58. But the study kind of goes a little like this. There, out of the graduating class, there were three distinct groups relative to goal setting. Those who just graduated and didn't have goals in mind at all. They just went on to the next step of their life. The second group had goals and wrote them down. And then the third group had goals, wrote them down, and then they were challenged to just draft a quick action plan. And the crazy thing is that when they went back to check out this study, we don't know if it's officially Yale or Harvard based on everything I saw. The 3%, so it was 87% did nothing, 13% or 12%, or math, come on, 10% or so wrote the goals down but didn't have an action plan, but it was like 3% had goals and an action plan that they wrote down. The 3%, in terms of financial gain and where they were in their lives, in terms of house, family, the things that they defined as success, the 3% that wrote the goals down and actually had a plan had more financial gain and some of those other success determinations than the entire 97% of everyone else. I think it was consulting gold for a lot of folks who talk about goals. But right now it just feels like, where do we go from here? Are you feeling some of that right now too?
Yeah, I think the place where everybody has realized that the plan that they had in place is no longer the plan that's going to work for delivering 2020, and they've got to rebuild a new one. And so often goals have been things that have been set and built over time. And so when the original plan just went out the window, you got to get new goals in place. And then one layer beyond that, you got to keep teams motivated, and none of that's particularly easy to do right now.
Yeah, it just feels uncomfortable. And the weird thing is that if, like most associations, we all have business operations that are fairly similar, right? So conferences, memberships, non-dues revenue, these models are being challenged right now. And maybe we were even comfortable before, but one thing that I know about growth is that comfort sometimes confronts growth. And right now it kind of gives us an opportunity where we can kind of form a new consistency. And some of the ingredients that go into goals, they really need to be believable. They need to be things that we can tackle ourselves right away. I asked Henry, my 10-year-old, I said, buddy, can you write down one goal you want to try this week? And you're not going to be able to see it real well, but he wrote, go outside more. And he's currently doing that right now so we can have a quiet house to conduct this webcast on. But those goals need to be believable, and they need to be able to move us to act. That action then needs to kind of have some kind of consistency around it and a vision for the future. So this quote from Tony Robbins seemed like a good place to start. But relative to business development, Carrie, where do goals in particular inform business development teams?
Yeah, I think ultimately for me, goals have always defined progress, right? The reason to go ahead and get a goal in place is so you can understand and benchmark and see where growth happens, and that with a goal in place that is measurable, you can also adjust the plan and the tactics as needed. So, it's really easy for somebody to say, I want more new business, right? I want more new organizational members, or I want more new exhibitors or sponsors at my trade show, or I want more new digital advertisers. But it's not until you say, I want to gain 10 new clients in the next 2 months, that you can start to really get down to goal setting and to define what that success looks like. And so for me, the place where people don't want to put goals in place, or even in this moment where somebody goes, it's too hard, there are too many variables for me to set goals around, often comes back to the place where somebody doesn't want to be held accountable. Either they don't want to hold themselves accountable, somebody else to hold them accountable to setting some of those goals and benchmarks along the way. it is fun to measure progress. It's fun to feel progression happen, and it's a huge part of what goals give us.
I agree, and I think it's funny about that accountability thing. I mean, I remember we were working together on a project actually, and I'm just talking about CRM. And one of the things that you hear from a lot of CRM, customer relationship management providers, is that accountability factor. It becomes really, really challenging to someone who doesn't really want folks looking over their shoulder. But it's really those metrics and that accountability that kind of moves the needle for sales day to day. You know, I was curious what your thought was. You've always been, well, greatly prepared, and I found that to be something that I've admired and certainly tried to take as part of my day to day. Talk to us a little bit about how preparation has been a key part of your success, and maybe what's one idea that folks can use right now to change their preparation habits?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, preparation is what allows me to find focus. It is unbelievable how easy it is for any professional working today to get distracted. We are connected to tons of different resources and social media. It's really easy to go take a break and, go look at, YouTube or Facebook or something like that, and to just lose focus of what we're doing. And so for me, part of the reason goals have always had such an important role is they allow me to come back and have focus even when I get distracted and get off course. And so I think what's important right now is that, quite frankly, some of the goals that I had for this year, I had to throw out the window, or I had to have my sales team throw them out the window, because the goals that we had set based on where we wanted to be, they're no longer the right goals for what's in place at the moment. And so from there, then I've really had to get myself and others back to the place of, what can I do today? What do I have the ability to do and control today? How do I set goals based on today? How do I recalibrate each and every day when so many pieces are moving so quickly? So I think a really good example of this is, now's a great time to spend time with the people that are already spending money with you. Those could be your organizational members. Those could be key suppliers in your industry and space. And so you could set a goal of saying, in the next 2 weeks, I want to have a phone meeting with 25% of my top suppliers that are already spending money with me, because I need to understand what's happening in their world. So that's my goal for the next 2 weeks, is to talk and have a meeting with all of that top 25%. Then today I'm going to reach out to that entire universe of that 25% and start working to get those phone meetings. And I'm going to ensure that I've got at least 12 phone meetings scheduled for the next 2 days to start working my way through that goal. It's the place where you can say, hey, I know that it's really important to talk to our customers. I'm going to define how long it's going to take me to do that, and I'm going to start to work it backwards so I can understand what I'm doing. But it would then allow you to sit in a meeting 2 weeks from now and say, I have talked to all of our big customers and suppliers, and here's what I am happening, and here's what's happening to their budgets, and here's what they're doing relative to marketing spends and planning for the rest of the year. But you can only do that if you have the discipline of setting those goals and then coming up with a plan and making sure that the right ones are the right ones for the moment that we're in right now.
What you shared is interesting. Well, last week we did a power webcast on taking your sales cycle and transforming it into a resource cycle, just for an opportunity to really to connect with the example you gave is spot on. My top customers, the best customers that mean the most in terms of their investment or their energy towards the association. And Marcus with the Society for Clinical Research Sites, and then Tiffany representing Association for Legal Administrators, both shared that resource. I followed up with them after that, and I just said, I'm just curious, how many of your customers, all of your customers, would you say, and I know that they work with hundreds, would you say you've been able to connect with as part of that transition? Because I think one thing that's sticking in sales folks' minds is it okay to sell right now? And yep. They've been using it as just sort of a way to say, all right, we're just in the relationship business, so let's talk really about what our organizations are doing to lead. Tell us about what your organizations are doing to lead, and I wonder if we have alignment somewhere. Those are the ways that they had shared it. And The numbers that they shared were both pretty similar. One said, I feel like 75% is an actual great number, 75% of my total customer base, and the other had 80. So you're right around the same mark. And I'm wondering, is that something that we would have in the normal times? I mean, that's a pretty big clip to go through that many customers. But I think right now people are home. People have different impacts on their time, and reverse engineering where you want to sort of end up into those daily clips like you're mentioning, it seems like it can make it consumable.
Yeah, absolutely. I think also if you're going to do that, you need to be prepared for the work. What are really think through, what are the questions I want to be asking people? How do I have a business-centered conversation with them to understand what's happening in their organization? So I do think there's a level of preparation that needs to happen so that you've got some consistency through those calls and conversations with top customers.
Yeah, and I mean, that just may be simply sitting down as a salesperson and saying, okay, sometimes we don't act as sales teams. Like if we don't believe in what we're saying or staying, we're not going to make any progress. And that goes back to the original formula on the Tony Robbins slide. It's just like that believability has to be important. The preparation you're mentioning of writing down sort of some of the things you may discuss, it also helps us stay focused on really being a resource instead of what's going on with you? Now you're changing that a little bit. You're asking the right question. Yeah. I know these are tough times. You come out right out and say it. Of course they are. Everyone's dealing with it, and if they're not dealing with it on their business, somewhere along the way they have friends and family going through something. So I mean, it's important just to kind of understand and just take a drive with them on where you are and where they are in the process. And I know the sales team, maybe more so than any part of the associations as an organization, or if you're a publisher tuning in today, sales teams in particular have measurements. Carrie, you rattled off a couple of good ones in terms of your contact goals and that kind of thing, but I'm wondering, could sales goals lead to changes in organizational strategy right now, just because there's been, the tap has been turned off in some cases? What do you think about that?
I think that there is a huge opportunity for alignment here, right? For there to be alignment in the sales goals that are set and how that relates to budget outcomes. And I think that goes whether it is the moment that we're living in right now relative to the pandemic and all the change that's happened, or sales goal setting for any time, right? So an association could say, we want to expand into a market that is adjacent to the space that we are in right now. We want to meet more of those customers, we want to fill their needs, and we want to win over the suppliers that are within that space. Well, if that's the case, then you've got to start to define what that success looks like. How much of that market share do we want to win? How many of the suppliers do we want to have spending with us? What do we want their average spend to be looking like? How much then time and investment and resource do we need to make? Maybe there's data that you need to purchase. Maybe there are products that need to change. Maybe there's a content stream that needs to be stood up to be able to win some of that market share in that adjacent space. And then I think all of that can drive back to the budget. What doesn't work very well is when you start with a budget and you say, great, we want to earn $100,000 in product X, but yet you don't have any mindfulness for all of the things that you've kind of outlined here that can feed into that budget. I think you're in a much better space if you can say, what is our intended goal? What does it take for us to get there? Then how can that drive to budget outcomes if we're able to, have a product that drives return on investment and things like that for those companies?
I think that right now the opportunity for our associations on the line and those who will tune in later, if you're in the content creation business right now, like so many of us are, this is a time to stop and just say, what will our clients want out of this? What do they get out of it? If we're selling a virtual setup, if we're moving through a new virtual project, it's important, I think, to really talk about what can the expectations be of the customers we're trying to asked to take this journey with us on these new products and services, and in a way set the bar high in a way that maybe it's a great idea to try to over-deliver as best you can right now. And so let that inform the goal of that new product development. I mean, product development could be its own thing. And I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is, what if you had to lead with budget first on this work? And what are the considerations there? Am I tapping on the right glass, or what do you think?
Yeah, I think there is a way to do that if you're leading with budget first, right? But if that's the case, then you've got to really be open to what the market's trying to solve for. So if your association or organization is saying, we're trying to solve for a budget deficit and here's what we want to do, then I think you need to be able to, again, align with sales and the sales goals to say, how can we make that happen? So, in that case, you'd say, great. Your goal is $100,000, and we're standing up a new product. The product needs to be able to solve for whatever the market need is right now, and that market need might be lead generation if you're not able to do in-person events. And so how can we get that accomplished, and then what kind of volume, traffic, and activity are we going to need in order to be able to get to that type of number? And
if it's not working, adjust. If you're going to commit, you need to have some touchstones to be consistent with those kinds of product delivery. Maybe a whole other conversation altogether for sure. But, right now, speaking of this digital transformation that so many of us are going through, I mean, the big thing that I think sales teams are looking at for their goals is that the virus has, it's crushed a key component, and that's inventory. Carrie, how are sales teams motivating through tough times?
Yeah, I think there's a lot in there in terms of how do you motivate through tough times, right? We're trying to be empathetic to ourselves and to our customers. We're trying to make sure that we're not opportunistic in the way that we are selling and listening in the marketplace right now. But I think we also need to recognize that there are places where there are real business needs that are still out there that have to get solved for in some sort of way. And so I think it's important for us as sales professionals to be the ones on the front line listening and understanding what that solve could potentially be. And it could be that you've got incredible training resources that are highly unique, and there's a real opportunity to be able to sell and position those because they're needed right now in the marketplace. And what we have been finding consistently here over the last few weeks is that companies are either moving incredibly slowly to make spending decisions because they've needed to stop and regroup, and they've needed to understand what the impact is to budget and outlook. Or there are actually places where they're moving incredibly quickly. If you've got the right product to solve the right need, they will buy very, very quickly and convert into a paid sale. And so it really is up to us to be the ones that are out there trying to figure out how business can best get done and having the right tone in the work that we're doing. But I don't think it helps to take a stance on either side, right? It doesn't work right now to say it's business as usual, and it doesn't actually work to say there's no business transactions that are happening. You've got to go in and apply that intelligence and really figure out what can get done, and then to start setting goals around that.
And either way, even if you don't have the inventory laid out right now, you can still reach out with the general idea that my association, we have value, this is where we're headed, these are our plans, this is what we're doing for members. There's a story to be able to share that, and your largest supporters want to hear it. You can then come back to that inventory or open up the conversation a little later about how people are, what other options there may be to do business with you. But there's always a reason to touch base. You can't have that awareness without picking up the phone or making sure you make a connection.
100%.
So just kind of sticking on this topic for just a moment, we're all resetting in just embracing the truth around the need to reset from your goals and your day-to-day. Are your teams finding that it's possible to move these sales through COVID? And I know you shared a little bit like that, but could you give us an example of how your teams are doing that?
Yeah, there are places to make our way through and to solve and to hit the reset button, right? And so after you've done the job of going out there and spending time with people and listening, I think it is then up to us to be the creative sales professionals that are able to really help to drive positive outcomes for people. So to be able to go back to your internal team and say, hey, right now in the marketplace, companies are willing to spend money if they're able to align their solution with this type of content. And going back to a content team saying, is it reasonable for us to get that done? Does the content already exist? Do we have something that we can repurpose? Do we have a subject matter expert that we can stand up this resource through, right? And to be able to customize a really valuable solution for them. Smart, creative sales professionals who have done a great job of listening can hit the reset button and find the right new path to work through. One of the remarkable things that the pandemic gives us time to do is for internal teams that often haven't had time to work together and really problem solve or break out of whatever, box everybody has worked in because they've been too busy with, their day job over here. I see organizations that are collaborating in ways that they never have before, and they're doing it quickly, and they're doing it in a smart way, and they're really trying to listen. And so I think that's a huge opportunity for people to hit a little bit of that reset button. When I think of reset, I think about the place where organizations need to be thinking about their products and solutions and how those are going to solve for their market and their industry in a new world that is potentially more digitally driven and more virtually driven than it was 3 months ago. Now is a great time to experiment and learn and try things so that you can build into a stronger business plan for 2021.
Yeah, and that stronger business plan, I think, you think of the weak spots potentially in your every group, every business, every association. There are weak spots to potentially look at, or maybe you might call them blind spots. You mentioned interdepartmental working. I think it's important to point out, just from a business development standpoint, invite them in. If you have a chance to share a phone call or two with your clients so that your colleagues can hear what some of your largest supporters are sharing and saying, it can go a long way to moving the needle, to your point, either getting things done a little faster. I've had a couple conversations where we've really had to focus on the timeline. Like, I know that we may be talking about a conference that's disrupted in July or August. You can't wait till July or August to figure out what new inventory looks like. So talk about that now and set some time to it. Say, look, for this to work, be honest with your teams. Say, welcome to the Thunderdome at times, right? We're dealing with the sales environment and how it fluctuates and moves, and right now is a crazy time for everybody. But let them know, for this to work optimally, here's sort of the way that sales cycle works. You can almost reverse engineer that objective like you had mentioned earlier. What do we need to accomplish with this new product line or resetting? How many people will that take to get into the position to do some business or to move into that business? And what's the timelines look like? If you're asking a client to also create sessions and virtual videos and all those things, they may be more willing to do it in this time, or they may be completely overwhelmed. So have a plan B on some of those assets, yeah?
One thing I'd add to that, Sean, is that if by chance you're a sales professional listening to this and you're going, I don't have control over all of those pieces,
right? That
sounds really nice, but where can I realistically hit the reset button? There are other smaller ways to do it. Think through the fact that you can reset the way that you prospect and their goals that you would set alongside an action just like that. Own the pieces that you can in the equation, no matter what your role is within your sales team and your larger organization.
Well said, and I think even with that too, you can use client feedback as an opportunity to sort of shed light on what the team, your colleagues and peers need to know about how people are receiving the new opportunities. I know Arthur Ashe, but in looking again through this, I just felt like this quote from Arthur Ashe pulled up on a book that I have, and it seemed like a great place to talk about how to sort of pivot out of what we might be used to into what everyone's going through right now. How do we get through this other end? And I think you mentioned it. Even if you're on a team where maybe you don't have a whole lot of voice, start where you are. Use what you can. Use what you have and do what you can. I think that translates pretty nicely into some of the things our teams are going through. At the end of the day, some of this comes down to our ability to handle change management. And I know we talked a little bit about managing the regroup after a disappointment, but Carrie, maybe we could talk through something specific. If you have a conference and it's off the books for the year, as an example, how do we what are the first steps to kind of getting through that change and managing really I've had it with the work that we do, managing through a little bit of disappointment. We would be in Salt Lake right now if things were normal. So just kind of thinking through what that disappointment is, I guess, how do you regroup once you've evaluated you need to make some changes?
So one of the things that I think I found really helpful is to acknowledge the losses that have come alongside of this. And those losses are across the board. Everybody's feeling them. But when you've put so much heart and soul and energy into building, for example, an event that's been canceled, you just can't wake up the next day and go, okay, well, we'll climb the next mountain, right? I think you need to realize that a lot of work in progress had been made to get everybody to that point. And while you, the sales professional, is disappointed and your organization is disappointed, and quite frankly, the companies that were going to be there, the exhibitors and sponsors and the speakers and the attendees, they're all feeling it too. And I think you've got to leave a little space for that to be. But I think the place where you then end up regrouping really does come through the place where you've got to be able to solve for them differently. And so I have found that as we've worked through event cancellations and we spend time on the phone with clients and customers who aren't going to be at our trade show and event, it's really up to us to hear where their pain points are. So often right now what we're hearing in the market is that their pain relates to being really worried about a pipeline that's not filled, right? If they normally come back from your show and event with 500 decently qualified leads that give them the sales fuel to get through the rest of the year, they're really worried about how lead progress is going to be made. And if that's something that your organization hasn't found a path to solve for outside of the trade show, now's the time to make that happen. And you don't wait to make that happen. You start doing that immediately. So I think that is just a huge opportunity when you start to shift your mindset into saying, okay, what now and what is possible? And then I think the other thing that has helped so often is that because sales dollars are really hard to find right now, you celebrate any win that comes in, right? And you celebrate, every small sale, you celebrate every big sale, you celebrate every meeting with a new prospect that we hadn't been able to reach before, you celebrate everything under the sun, because those little elements that are all tied into goals and actions and activities are part of what we're doing right now to fuel success for the future, whether that's success that we're able to realize in 2020 or success that we're able to realize in 2021.
That's right. That's excellent. And I think you do need to celebrate those little moments. I had one yesterday where I had a member. Every once in a while you're selling all these different things, but a member call finds its way to you somehow. This one was someone who really just wanted to know other ways to get involved because they had so hoped to go to the conferences. And it turned into just sort of like a callback to say, hey, we're right now, this is the situation that those meetings are in particular. But then I just said, well, I remember we just said, how are you doing? And it ended up talking through about their experience at the conference the year prior. And in this case, a meeting they had at the beginning of the year and how they were trying to prioritize everything this organization was doing for the remainder of the year. And we got to talking about their personal experiences in that industry, and it was awesome. In the conversation, she mentioned a big-time supporter and how great her experience has been, and that she had been working with their exhibitor or sponsor since meeting them at the show and doing a panel together. And my first opportunity this morning is just to share that note with that support. It felt great to do it, and opened up guess what, a conversation for later. And
this is such a human moment, Sean, that's happening right now. And I think for people that are able to find a authentic voice and approach to that human moment, it makes all the difference.
Yeah, and I encourage you guys that on the sales side, you get a few minutes to trust me, we all have make a few minutes, right, to connect with some members and really just kind of understand what they're going through. I know we get it at the briefings. I know we get it through the magazines and the e-newses and everything else that we follow for our groups, but make a couple quick calls out to some members that maybe you've met briefly or you just thought you'd reach out. It'll brighten your day and let you know a little bit about the value of what you guys are putting out there as association professionals. So in preparing this, kind of thinking of, how do we get our sales teams focused on the best business outcome given the reality of our circumstances, our teams kind of came together and just said, look, let the best business outcome inform the long term and the highest priority inform the day. Carrie, how do we get our teams, and we'll just use that example of the conference was just canceled. How do we get our teams focused on what the best business outcome is right now?
Yep. So I think that focused on the best business outcome that can happen right now is really breaking down what that looks like. And in every organization, it's going to be a little bit different. For some organizations, they've already rebuilt a new sales plan for the following year. And the best business outcome is going to be to start to get a important expo plan in place for 2021. And in other markets, the best outcome for today is really going to be slowing down, understanding what's happening in the market, and building a stronger plan for the year ahead. Oftentimes, that stronger plan includes virtual or hybrid event components, or that plan involves getting content that had been planned to be delivered in a 2020 conference broken out over the course of webinars or other educational sessions.
Yep.
I think what's more important than anything is that people are not approaching their plan as a rinse and repeat, right? And whatever that is, the world has changed, and our plans as sales professionals need to change as well. And so how does that change new product offerings that you're going to have? How does that change the inventory that you're going to sell around? How does that change the way that people are going to generate leads or share content in a virtual world? We need to be the smart professionals that are out there learning from others in environments like PAR, building business connections, and bringing those ideas back to our organizations so that they can be activated.
Absolutely. I think that there's also about looking at that from a best business outcome. Sometimes I think it's really just thinking ahead of, okay, what's the best business outcome for just this week? Yep. It's okay. But having that longer-term thought of, well, look, if we've canceled, the best business outcome is that your conference in 2021 will be around where you thought it would be in 2020. And if you have fall meetings, that we're able to have those. But in between, we can still raise all boats by thinking of that. Those are great ideas. And I think it is idea.
I often think of it as we cannot come out of what's happening right now in 2020 and expect to re-enter into the same exact place. So we're going to be in a better place if we've built new products that perform better for the people that need to have things solved for them. That is a better outcome.
Absolutely. And I think what we hope to do is really just kind of dive into some ideas to reframe goals for right now. And so PAR came up with a our 4 Ps for sales goals in the new 2020, and that's prep, prioritize, position, and pinpoint. And so let's just talk a little bit about that. You know, we're talking now, and I think you just hit on it, really, is preparing for what's ahead. Well, I mean, that's going to be different for all of us. That's one of the hard things about that rinse and repeat idea that you mentioned. They're all of us have something different, right? Some of us have meetings that are tentative, some are canceled, some of our products need to be shortened up to make them more attractive in the packages. Talk a little bit about how you can prepare for what's ahead in the maybe taking that long-term view and breaking it into right now.
Yeah. So I think there are a few things that we can do to get that done. I think the first thing is getting an initial outlook in place for 2021, even with all the incomplete information that you have. And I know that every time I say to somebody, I need a sense of what's going to happen next year, they go, I don't know, Carrie, I can't tell you. But we've got to start understanding what that revenue scenario could be based on the outcomes that, or the information that we have right now. Beyond that, it allows us to start to back end into the plan then we've got to build. Are the strategic plans for the organization the same? Are we changing how much market share that we're winning? Is our organization growing or contracting right now in this moment? Does that change the types of products that we need to produce and how they perform? Are there products that ultimately are not going to be the right fit for market need for next year? And we need to start to think about how we get those sunset. Are there places that we have to build brand new solutions? We've got to start getting our arms around them now. And the way we do that is with some test and learn implications. So, for example, if an organization doesn't have webinars or webcasts as a regular part of their product portfolio because they've had other outlets for education, maybe it's that they've got to figure this piece out because it's going to be an important component if in-person meetings don't happen in the same way that they once did. So start to test and learn that in a really small way, right? How can we get 6 done over the next 4 weeks? Who's the audience going to be? Is there sponsors? What's the data that comes along with that? What are the other resources? Did it work? Do we want to continue it? Is it not a success? Do we want to let it go? But now's the time to figure out some of those pieces. Organizations are going to plan for budgets earlier, meaning organizations, the association you work for is going to want budgets earlier to get outlook for 2020 earlier. And then the people that you're selling to, regardless of what you're selling, their budgets are going to be slower and longer. And so we've got to try to get ahead of those 2 factors as quickly as we can.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I thought your example of some of that transition inventory, like we have one right now very similar. It's a conference that it's a global meeting. It's overseas. It's not in the U.S. Working to try to take the conference format, turn into a series. One of the benefits that came out of those conversations is that you know, we don't reach a whole lot of non-members in those regions.
Yeah.
Yep. So
start fixing that now, right?
Yeah, right. So if you're able to attract people with the new product line, one of the new objectives could simply be non-member awareness. Get them in, kind of let them experience some of it. To be honest, it'll make your business partner community happy if they have qualified leads coming in that's new, you know.
Or net new, right? Yep.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. So there's a couple ways to kind of break apart the objectives of each of these things, and preparing for what's ahead seems like a great first step. Now, in working together over the years, Carrie, I know that you are a very good prioritizer, and sometimes I know that your last thing on the to-do list is thinking through what my to-do list is going to be tomorrow. And I have the good fortune of working with some other folks, and I try to fit it in there. We even have notepads designed for our to-dos and what we should be prioritizing. Can you talk a little bit about where sales teams can start their day?
Yeah. So it's interesting. I mean, I like many of us, typically travel a lot. I don't normally sit in the same place for as long as I've sat in the same place during this pandemic. And it has meant that it's been really important to get great habits in place for working in this environment. And I think habits are a massive part of daily organization and then goal setting and long-term success. They all come back to a level of discipline that feeds into all of that. So for me personally, when I start my workday, and I love starting my workday early just by my own personal nature, I have been spending anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes at the start of every day consuming some level of content. There's so much great content that's out there. I don't want to miss the ideas that are happening in the business to consumer world and other examples of B2B business that can be relevant for our sales teams or the clients that we serve. And so for me, the start of each day has had to have that piece there. It's actually been incredibly important because the volume of email communication with content and resources is so much that if I don't have a place to park that a little bit until I can get to it later, I would lose every good working hour of the day just taking in what comes into my inbox between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. I am constantly rewriting and reprioritizing the day, the week, what needs to get done. I have found that to be incredibly effective to helping to stay focused. And then the last part of that is I've been working to keep a careful eye on the revenue opportunities. And so for any salesperson thinking through the products that I think are going to drive the biggest outcome for this year and to next year, to figure out how we're adjusting to have enough resources moving into those areas. It's really easy to get wrapped up in the volume of what happens in one's day or the inbox or all the other distractions that come in our working environment right now. But I have had to be so diligent about blocking and tackling time for the pieces that I believe are going to have the biggest impact.
I think that's great, and I think back to as someone who's always had to be a producer, someone who's out and calling on clients and working through it. When I look at my to-do list, my priority list, there literally is only one consistent key to any of that success over the years, me hitting budgets, and that is the amount of contacts and time that I spend on getting to those contacts. I have fluctuating, we're all human. I mean, I've been doing this a while, but I have fluctuating degrees of salespersonship, or market questions or the things that you build into your skill set. But when it comes to being consistent, I've always tried to make sure that my outbound client activity is at a certain level for the day, or I just don't feel right. And so I will share that during this time right now, I feel like it's really, really important for association teams in particular to understand the value of your business development team's time and that they need to defend it a little bit. I mean, otherwise we could be in meetings till the cows come home, right? So sales calls are critical. How would you recommend defending time for your day in terms of your outbound sales activity, Carrie?
Yeah, so for me, it really is blocking and tackling that time in the calendar. Part of it comes through the rigor of setting meetings with the prospects that I know I want and need for us to be able to reach, and ensuring even that if I look across the course of a week, right, knowing some days fluctuate, have I reserved, right, a third or a half of my time to those outbound business development functions, and have I reserved other portions of my time for the other organizational pieces that need to get done? That breakdown of time in a larger way, right, will look different for different people depending on their work and responsibilities and if they're 100% dedicated to the development of revenue. But I think that's a great way to be able to do it. The other part of that is that for me, if that's the work that's the most important work, it's the work that has to get done earliest in the day. So after I might work through things like my content deep dive, that's the work that has to get done in the morning if I can prioritize it to that spot to ensure that it doesn't slip.
So a part of goals and just is behavior, and that behavior can kind of make or break us sometimes. And I think if you just write it down, let's be like the 3% in that Harvard or Yale study that I sort of
Right.
could mention earlier. But I think in just being able to write down, this is what I'm not going to do anything else until I tackle this. It's almost, we're almost designed to stop and get involved in something to have distraction. And I think it's really critical to continue to prioritize that time, everybody. So make sure that you're taking the steps to do that. Start tomorrow. Say, hey, I'm going to make my client time start at 9, and when I start there, whenever you're starting your day, and see where it takes you.
Yep.
Now, this is one that I think seems tough for organizations that are maybe dealing with cancellations or change, just the uncertainty of what the industry is. But how do we focus on positioning value right now?
Yeah. So I have been just blown away by the role that associations have taken in representing their professions during the coronavirus. And so there's so much incredibly great, valuable work that they are doing in those industries. And I found it to be just so important for the person that is responsible for sales and business development to be taking the time to help their supplier community understand the value of the work that the profession is doing. And so sharing content that's not sales-related content, sharing information and resources of what the association is doing right now to serve their members. That could be legislative activities. That could be research that is being done. I think that there is significant work that can be done to table set with your supplier community, current clients and future prospects, to help them understand the value of the profession and the role of the association. And if you're doing those things, you're going to be delivering value now. You're going to be giving them information that they need. I think there's also an opportunity for associations to go back and look at the content that they've developed over the last 2 years. Are there free resources that they can be opening up
Sure.
even to that supplier community to help them deliver their best right now for the industry?
Yeah, keep in mind, associations, that some of your business partners, they don't only work with your members. They work with clients that could be potentially your members, and sharing some of allowing them to share some of those resources and be a thought leader in their own right, even if it's just a connector. It doesn't always have to be that they're the author of said information. But they might find value in helping to connect people to what you all are doing. And I know that that's played out in several organizations that we've been talking to over the last couple of weeks. A really important time to really continue to position your value. And one thing that's critical and so hard, I think, for 21st century salespeople. We maybe have, while we're on this webcast, I bet each of us have 50, 60 things that we could that have come into our inboxes or I've been buzzing on the cell phone. They distract us from, again, defending that time for sales activity. And one really, really important part of the goal setting for what's happening right now is pinpointing your next step. So actually making that a priority in the conversation or the communication that you are having so that you know where and when to follow up, I think is critical. Carrie, do you share that point of view?
Yeah, I don't like leaving conversations open-ended where you get off the phone and it's not clear what the next step or the next connection point is going to be. And so even if you're having a conversation right now with a client or a customer that isn't about building a proposal, solving for an immediate product need, whatever that might be, it's still important to understand and gain clarity on when you're going to reconnect and set that time frame. It could be something, Sean, as simple as saying, great, I'm going to make sure that you and I connect in the first week of August because at that point, I'm going to have clarity as to what our product roadmap is going to be for next year. You're going to know more about what your business is doing and the budgets that you're starting to pull together. But we're going to want to make sure that we at least have 20 minutes set aside so that we can get reconnected and start to understand what the next few months are going to look like. It's not hard to ask people for their time. And if you've already had the right to earn a little bit of it, make sure that as you work your way through that conversation, you're gaining that next step and staying in their calendar.
And even if you don't have the product or portfolio completely ironed out, like the new thing from your conference.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't have whatever your conference is transitioning to, or maybe there's a new package or something that your association is delivering. Even if that's not completely ironed out, don't let that stop you from setting these objectives and making sure that you follow up. You're almost qualifying your customers for whether or not they're still able to do business right now. And the follow-up or pinpointing that next step could simply be, well, when we talk again next, I'd love to show you what we're doing with other people in the industry on our new virtual setup or our webcast series or our digital magazine or whatever you guys might have. Or membership package. You know, it just depends on your role. But, of course, setting that time and pinpointing the next step is all part of it. I know we're nearly out of time, so just in quick summary, it's really about long-term prep and short-term pep to make sure that we are preparing, prioritizing, positioning, and pinpointing our work, our day, towards the new feel for 2020 right now. We will get through it. We will see the end of this tunnel. There'll probably be some more challenges along the way, but I think if we're consistent in the way we're approaching our goals and objectives, we'll get through it. Carolyn, I know we don't have a whole lot of time to take some questions for Carrie today, but did you have any that have come through on the chat here?
Yeah, guys, you know, in what you were talking about all the different things that you have coming into your inboxes and all the things you can be doing in guarding your time, how do you guard your time when there are so many different priorities, Carrie?
Yeah. So, again, for me, a lot of that comes down to discipline and a habit. I am actually also one of the tools that I use all the time is to set time limits on the things that I do. There are times that you can put 2 hours into an activity that should just, at the end of the day, probably take 20 minutes. And by saying, great, this is going to be a 20-minute activity and I'm going to do it right during this block of time, it forces you to stay within that confinement that you've made for it. And sometimes that's the right thing to do, rather than I'm going to build this proposal and, I don't know, it might take me 20 minutes or it might take me 2 hours. No, you've got to be disciplined in how you're using that time and scheduling it in your calendar as a result.
Have you ever had the phenomenon of airplane power, Carrie? Like you get on an air, you're like sitting down, and all of a sudden, like the 2 hours to Chicago, you're like, I literally just finished like 8 things on this to-do list with incredible accuracy. Like I feel like it was the best time spent.
Yep. I remember hearing a story many years ago about a executive who used to twice a year take a flight from East Coast to West Coast and back again just for the work time.
No, man.
Just for the focused, uninterrupted work time, right? That somehow they had felt that was the best way to be able to truly block out and prioritize. So just a creative thought.
Well, let's work to get to plane power just in the confines of our offices, right? So
I would wholeheartedly agree.
Carrie, thank you, and I know your team at MCI, some of them may be listening too, so thank everyone for jumping on and sharing some of your time today around goals for now and next through these current times in the new 2020. So thank you so much for spending that time with us. Carolyn, tell us about our next webcast.
Yes, we'll have another webcast coming in about 2 weeks. We'll be talking about how association teams can embrace new ideas for the bottom line. So in talking today about goals, what are some new ideas that you and your team can embrace in this new time that we're experiencing? And PAR, Professional for Association Revenue, you know, we're doing this preview series right now, but hoping to launch completely for full membership options, organizational membership, peer support, community with people like Carrie and others, resources, and of course new ideas like you heard today. But we'll be launching this summer 2020, and for now visit mypar.org for some more information, and of course to sign up for some future webcasts as well. So we're really looking forward to that.
Well, thank you both for your time today, and thanks everybody for tuning in. We hope to see you on the 14th, and until then, stay safe and successful.
Thank
everyone.
you. Bye. Thanks, Carrie. Thanks, Sean. Bye, everyone.